Francis was born in Assisi around 1181, the son of Peter Bernardone, a wealthy cloth merchant, and Donna Pica, a pious and simple woman. In his youth he was cheerful, outgoing, generous, but also vain. He loved music, friends, and banquets. He dreamed of adventure and glory like a knight. He was beloved by all, but the emptiness in his heart silently accompanied him. During a prolonged illness, he was forced to retire. In the solitude of his bed, he began to feel God's restlessness. One night he dreamed of a palace filled with shining weapons and heard a voice telling him that those weapons were for him and his knights. He believed the dream was a sign of a warrior's vocation, but it was another battle that God was preparing for him. An inner war, a fight against himself. One day, riding through the outskirts of Assisi, he saw a leper on the road. His instinct was to retreat, but his heart pushed him forward. He dismounted, approached him, gave him alms, and kissed him. In that kiss, something changed. He would later recall, "What seemed bitter to me became sweetness of soul and body." It was the first step in his conversion. Then he entered the old church of San Damiano, nearly in ruins. As he prayed, he heard a clear, living voice coming from the crucifix. "Francis, repair my house, which is in ruins." He took the words literally. He sold his father's fabrics, bought stones, and began rebuilding churches with his own hands. His father accused him before the bishop, demanding that he return the money. Francis, in front of everyone, surrendered his possessions and his own clothes, saying, "Now I can say, 'Our Father who art in heaven.'" And he left the tribunal wrapped in the bishop's mantle, free, poor, and light as the wind. From then on, he lived among lepers and beggars. One day at Mass, he heard the gospel in which Jesus sends his disciples, "Take no gold, no silver, no sandals," and he exclaimed with joy, "This is what I want, this is what I seek, this is what I desire with all my heart." He then began to live the gospel literally, walking barefoot, wearing a simple tunic of raw cloth, calling everyone brothers and proclaiming peace. But poverty did not free him from temptations. On one occasion, he felt strongly assailed by thoughts of impurity. He fled the place and ran outside into the cold night. He found a thorn bush and without hesitation threw himself into it, surrendering his body to the pain as penance. Miraculously, the thorns transformed into thornless white and red roses. Francis arose unharmed, and from that day on, he was never again troubled by carnal temptations. Little by little, other men followed him. They were young men who, like him, sought something more than the world offered. They called themselves Friars Minor, God's little ones. They worked, prayed, preached, and served the poor. They lived with nothing, but with full hearts. As they walked the streets, they sang, "May the Lord give you peace." In 1209, Francis took his rule to Rome to seek the blessing of Pope Innocent III. That night, the Pope dreamed of the Basilica of St. John Lateran about to fall, being held up by a small, poor man. The next morning, he recognized Francis and approved of his way of life. Francis rejoiced, but maintained his humility. He never wanted to be a priest. He accepted the position of deacon only, so he could proclaim the gospel in the liturgy, but said, "I am not worthy to touch the altar of the Lord." Among those enchanted by his life was a young noblewoman, Clare of Assisi. She renounced her wealth and followed her path of poverty and prayer, becoming the founder of the Poor Clares. Francis called her God's little plant. Together, they taught that pure love is that which gives itself completely to Christ. Francis had a deep piety and love for sacred things. He loved the Eucharist and the liturgy. He said that everything that touches the body of the Lord must be pure and beautiful. He rebuked the brothers who left churches dirty or chalices unattended. He loved prayer and the Psalms. He often fasted for long periods and made a pilgrimage to Mount Gargano, the sanctuary of St. Michael the Archangel, to ask for humility and strength against temptation. He saw God everywhere. He called the sun his brother, the moon his sister, and even death his sister, death. He spoke to the birds, and they seemed to understand. In Gubbio, a wolf was terrorizing the people. Francis went to meet him, made the sign of the cross, and said, "Come here, brother wolf. In the name of Christ, do me no harm." The animal lowered its head, and the two made a pact of peace. In 1219, Francis crossed the sea and went to Egypt in the midst of the Crusades to meet Sultan al-Malik. He did not come with weapons, but with words of peace. He spoke of Christ, and the Sultan, admired by his courage and meekness, sent him away with respect. It was a miracle of reconciliation in the midst of war. 3 years later, in Greccio, he wanted to celebrate Christmas differently. He prepared a nativity scene with hay, an ox, and a donkey to show the people the humility of the God who became a child. That night, during Mass, one of those present saw the living child Jesus in Francis's arms. It was the birth of the Christian nativity scene. On Mount Alverne, nearing the end of his life, Francis withdrew into prayer. He spent days fasting, praying to feel, in body and soul, the love of the crucified Christ. One day he saw in the sky a seraph in the form of Jesus on the cross, and when the vision ceased, he perceived the wounds of the Lord on his hands, feet, and side. These were the stigmata, the seal of perfect union with the crucified one. Sick and blind, he returned to the Porziuncola. Even in pain he sang, "Praised be you, my Lord, for all your creatures, for brother sun, for sister moon, for sister water, for brother fire, and for sister death." For him, everything was a reason for praise, even suffering. He said, "Perfect joy is to suffer for the love of Christ." On October 3rd, 1226, sensing his time was near, he asked to be laid naked on the earth. He sang Psalm 141 and thanked Sister Death for leading him to eternal life. He died peacefully, surrounded by his brothers, while the city of Assisi filled with hymns. 2 years later, Pope Gregory IX canonized him. Francis of Assisi was the joyful poor, the free man, the mirror of Christ. He lived the gospel with simplicity, making poverty a path of love and humility the highest wisdom. And he showed the world that holiness is not a distant ideal, but a path of effort, conversion, and daily surrender. He did not want to be admired, but imitated. He became a saint not suddenly, but step by step, fall by fall, grace upon grace, until his heart was mingled with that of Christ himself. And for this reason, the whole world recognizes him, the man who, loving without measure, became like God.